When you're weak, God is strong. When you are down and out, God is there. When you think you got nobody in your corner, God is with you. When you think you're too weak to go on, God is carrying you. That even when you're weak, God is strong. How the Apostle Paul was given something, and it actually came from a place you never thought it would come from, to humble him. Because sometimes we get too big for our britches. We get the big head. We think we're doing things. We think we're doing things even when God's doing it for us. We try to take the credit. And in this passage we're going to go to, and we're going to go to it, 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. So 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. And what the book of Corinthians is about, especially the second letter, Paul is very hurt by the Corinthian church because the Corinthian church is questioning his apostleship. So you got to realize there's this church in Corinth that's questioning whether Paul is an apostle or not. I mean, a lot of these people, a lot of them are baby Christians. A lot of them are following different people. And he even says early in the letter, y'all want to be fans of Apollos, who's a preacher. Y'all want to be fans of this person, fans of that person. As long as we're all doing the job, you should all understand our apostleship. So one thing that he's mad about, he's mad that he's done all this work to help this church get to where it is, and they question, is he the man that God called him to be? Is he an apostle? That's what they question. This church is questioning Paul, the guy who started the church of Corinth. Is he an apostle? So Paul basically, what's up? Paul basically says to this church, look, I'm the guy. I set y'all up. I know who Jesus is. He even says this. He says, I've been to the third heaven. So we're going to look at it. So let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 to 10. I'm not going to be long because I only got about 12 minutes, okay? So y'all hang with me. I got about 12 minutes to give y'all the word before I go see my son play soccer. So 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter, 1 to 10. Let me start with verse 1. He says this. This is Paul. I must go on boasting, though there is nothing to be gained by it. Listen, he said, I must boast. I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up in the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man was caught into paradise. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And he heard things that cannot be told, which man may not utter. Listen, he's talking about himself. He said, I've been to the third heavens. I've seen the things of God. I've seen the great things of Jesus. I've been places that nobody else has been. That's what Apostle Paul is saying. And he's saying, but listen to this, verse 5. He said, on behalf of this man, who he's talking about himself, on behalf of myself, who's done all these great things, on behalf of this man, I will boast, but on my own behalf, I will not boast, except in my weaknesses. So right away, he says, on behalf of this man who did all these great things, which is himself, I'll boast. But I'm talking about me. And because it's me, I will not boast. And he said, the only thing I'm going to boast in is his weaknesses. And doesn't that sound weird, to boast in your weaknesses? I mean, think about this. When you go to a job interview, right away, they ask, what is your weaknesses? And if y'all like me, you don't even want to tell them what your weaknesses are. You don't even want to say what your weaknesses are because if you say it, it will make you look weak to them. But here, Apostle Paul says, not only am I going to tell you my weaknesses, I'm going to brag about how weak I am. Isn't that a weird thing to do, is brag about how weak you are? But that's what Apostle Paul does. And check this out. So 2 Corinthians chapter 12, and listen to this, verse 6. Though if I should wish to boast, I would not be a fool, for I would be speaking the truth. You ever heard that? Like, look, you can call me arrogant if you want to. The truth is the truth. He's like, look, you can say I'm boasting if you want to, but I'm just telling you the truth. He said, but he goes, but I refrain from it so that no one may think more of me than he sees in me or hears from me. He says, I refrain from telling the truth about how great I am because I don't want people to look at me and see me. I want you to see the message I'm giving. I want people to see the message, not see the messenger, is what he's saying here. So look at verse 7. This is great. So to keep me from becoming conceited because of the surpassing greatness of the revelations. So he's saying to keep him from getting the big head, being conceited, because he's the guy. He's the guy that got the revelations. So he says to keep me from, being conceited, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to harass me, to keep me from becoming conceited. So he's saying there was a thorn there was an ailment that came to me from Satan. Satan put a thorn in my flesh, is what he's saying. But the reason why it's there is to keep me from being conceited, is to keep me from being overconfident. And so God allowed a thorn of the flesh to come into Paul's life. Now, a lot of people have speculated about what that thorn is. At some point, the Apostle Paul struggled with blindness, so it could have been the thorn. At another time, he struggled, with debilitating things going on with his hands. That could be. Some people think it's the Corinthian church itself. That is actually his thorn. But he's saying that Satan, a messenger from Satan, gave him a thorn in his side, and the only reason that's in his side is to keep him from not being conceited. And so listen to this, verse 8. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord about this, that it should leave me. Listen to what? So 3 times he asked the Lord to take this thorn out of his side. 3 times. Have you ever asked the Lord anything 3 times? Have you ever pleaded with him over and over again? This man, who is a apostle, a super apostle, a guy that continues to do the things for the Lord, gets this thorn aside, get this ailment, get this problem. And he asked the Lord 3 times to pull it out. And listen to verse 9. Verse 9. He said, Lord, please remove this thorn from my side. Please remove this ailment. In verse 9. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. God tells Paul, I'm not going to pull out the thorn in your flesh. What I want you to understand is that when you're weak, God is strong. When you are down and out, God is there. When you think you got nobody in your corner, God is with you. When you think you're too weak to go on, God is carrying you. That even when you're weak, God is strong. So what we do in our weaknesses, we should pray. We should get with God. We should petition God to help us. Petition God to carry us. So it says here's what he does. Because he understands when he's the weakest, God's the strongest in his life. When he's the weakest, God is showing up and showing out in his life. So he says this, because God is strong when he's weak, he says, therefore I will boast all the more gladly for my weaknesses. He's saying, therefore, when I'm weak, I will boast, because when I'm weak, God is showing his strength through me. And he says, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. So that God's power, the power of Christ, will show up. And then he says this in verse 10. For the sake of Christ, then, I'm content in my weaknesses. And here's what I'm telling you all. When you're feeling weak and you're a follower of Jesus, be content and allow God to work his way in your situation. Allow God to work his way in your life. Allow God to carry you. And he says he's content in his weaknesses. And listen to this. He says, because he knows that God's power is perfect when he's weak. He says, I'm content in my weaknesses. He says some more. Insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. He's content in his weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. Why? Because when he's weak, God is strong. Let that sink in, people. When you're the weakest, God is the strongest. So don't get the big head and let him do what he do. All right, I said I wasn't going to be here that long. Thank you all for showing up at the word while I wait. And I'm usually waiting because my son's at soccer practice. But actually, I'm waiting. I gave you a word right before my son has a soccer game. That's why I got to get off now. Thank you for showing up. I love you all. Way and word. I'm out.